Commander Kim Day watched the stars through the bridge window of his ship, the UES Serenity. The medical vessel had been traveling for 3 days, carrying supplies to colonies that needed help. This was normal work for humans in space. They were known as the helpers, the ones who brought medicine and food when other species were fighting. "Sir, we have a message coming in," said Lieutenant Park Min from her station. She looked worried as she read the signal. "It's from Kepler Station. They say they need help right away." Day turned to look at the main screen. The image showed a large trading station where many different alien species lived and worked together. But something was wrong. The station was shaking and bright flashes of light were hitting it from outside. "Those are weapons," whispered Ensign Cho Young, the youngest member of the crew. "Someone is attacking the station." Through the communication channel, they could hear voices screaming for help. The station commander, a blue-skinned Altarian, was trying to send out emergency calls to anyone who could help them. "This is Kepler Station to any ships in the area. We are under attack by Catherian forces. They came without warning. Our shields are failing. We have families here, children. Please help us." Day felt his stomach drop. The Catherians were known as a warrior race, but they usually only fought other military ships. Attacking a civilian trading station was against all the rules that kept peace in the galaxy. "Set course for Kepler Station, maximum speed," Day ordered. But even as he said it, he knew they would not arrive in time. The Serenity was a medical ship. It had only basic weapons, just enough to scare away pirates. Against real warships, it would be useless. The crew worked quickly, preparing medical supplies and rescue equipment. Dr. Lee Soo-jin, the chief medical officer, began setting up the emergency surgery room. Everyone knew what they would find when they arrived. It took them 4 hours to reach Kepler Station. By then, the attacking ships were gone. What remained was a broken piece of metal floating in space. Parts of the station were still burning. Even in the vacuum of space, bodies of different alien species floated among the wreckage. "Life signs?" Day asked quietly. "Very few, sir," reported Park Min. "Maybe 100 survivors out of 3,000 people who lived there." The rescue work took 12 hours. They pulled survivors from twisted metal and broken rooms. Day watched his crew work, saving whoever they could find. Many of the survivors were children from different species who had been visiting the station with their families. A small girl with purple skin and 3 eyes grabbed Day's uniform as he carried her to safety. "The bad ships came so fast," she whispered. "They didn't even ask us to surrender, they just started shooting." When they finally finished the rescue, Day sent his report to Earth Command. He also sent copies to the Galactic Confederation, the DEWM organization that was supposed to keep peace between all the different species in space. The response came back within days. The Confederation called for talks with the Catherians. They wanted to have meetings to discuss the problem. Some species suggested economic punishments, like stopping trade with the Catherian Empire. Earth's representatives agreed with the peaceful approach. Ambassador Nam Tae-hyung gave a speech to the Confederation Council, asking for calm and patience. He said that violence would only create more violence, and that talking was always better than fighting. The other alien species nodded and smiled. This was exactly what they expected from humans. Earth's people were always the ones who wanted to solve problems with words instead of weapons. They were useful for this, but many aliens thought humans were too soft to be real warriors. The Zentarian delegate made a joke during a private meeting. "Humans are like helpful pets," he said to his friends. "Good for carrying medicine and making peace talks, but they don't have the stomach for real fighting." Even some of humanity's allies thought this way. They respected humans for their kindness and their ability to help others. But they didn't think Earth's people understood how dangerous the galaxy could be. The Catherians heard about these reactions. Their war leaders met in secret chambers on their homeworld, planning their next moves. They had tested the galaxy's response by attacking Kepler Station, and the result was exactly what they had hoped for. Just talking, just meetings, just peaceful solutions. "The humans are weak," said General Vextar, the leader of the Catherian military. "They talk about peace, while we take what we want. The other species hide behind their words while we build our strength. He looked at a map showing human colonies scattered across space. If we can break the humans, the rest of the galaxy will fall in line. They depend on Earth's people to keep the peace. Without them, there will be chaos, and chaos is where we grow strong. The other Cytherian leaders agreed. They began planning something bigger than the attack on Kepler Station. They wanted to send a message that would show everyone how powerless the peaceful humans really were. As they planned, supply ships like the Serenity continued their work across the galaxy. Human doctors treated the wounded, human engineers fixed broken stations, and human diplomats worked day and night to prevent wars between other species. None of them knew that their peaceful nature, the thing that made them respected throughout the stars, was about to be tested in ways they had never imagined. Dr. Lee Soo-jin was reading a story to a group of refugee children when the ground started shaking. The medical center on New Geneva was always busy, but today felt different. The children came from many different worlds, all seeking safety on this peaceful human colony. "Dr. Lee, what was that noise?" asked a small boy with green skin and large eyes. His family had escaped from a war zone 3 months ago, and loud sounds still scared him. "Probably just a transport ship landing," Soo-jin said with a smile, though she felt worried. The shaking had been too strong for a normal ship. She continued reading, trying to keep the children calm. Then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in red light. Through the windows, Soo-jin could see bright flashes in the sky above the city. These were not transport ships. The communication system crackled to life. "All citizens of New Geneva, this is Governor Park Ji-sung. We are under attack by unknown forces. Move to the nearest shelter immediately. This is not a drill." Soo-jin's hands shook as she helped the children stand up. New Geneva was supposed to be safe. It was a colony world far from any military zones, home to 3 million people from dozens of different species. Half of them were refugees like these children, people who had already lost their homes once. "Stay close to me," she told the children as they moved toward the emergency stairs. The elevator was not working anymore. Outside, the sky was full of large, dark ships. Soo-jin recognized them from the news reports about Kepler Station. Cytherian warships, bigger than anything she had ever seen. They hung over the city like metal, clouds raining fire down on the buildings below. The children's hospital across the street exploded in a ball of orange flame. Soo-jin pushed the children away from the windows as glass fell like deadly rain. She could hear screaming from all directions. "Why are they shooting at the hospital?" cried a little girl who had been born on New Geneva. "There are only sick people there." Soo-jin had no answer. The Cytherians were not targeting military bases or government buildings. They were destroying everything: schools, homes, medical centers, markets where families bought food. This was not a battle. This was slaughter. In the basement shelter, hundreds of people huddled together. Humans sat next to aliens they had never met before, all equally terrified. The building shook again and again as explosions rocked the city above them. "My wife works at the spaceport," whispered an old man to Soo-jin. "She was supposed to come home hours ago." His eyes were full of tears he was trying not to shed in front of the children. A young mother held her baby close to her chest. The child was crying, but no sound came through the shelter's thick walls. Above them, the bombing continued without pause. Communications officer Yoon Sang-ho tried desperately to contact other colonies for help. His equipment kept sparking, damaged by the electromagnetic pulses from the explosions above. "I can't reach anyone," he reported to the shelter coordinator. "The Cytherians are blocking all signals. We're cut off." Hours passed. Sometimes the bombing would stop for a few minutes and people would hope it was over. Then it would start. Again, worse than before. The shelter's air recycling system was struggling with so many people inside. Soo-jin used her medical training to help people who were having panic attacks or breathing problems. But she could not help the fear in her own heart. Every time the building shook, she thought about her colleagues in other parts of the city. Were they still alive? Were their shelters holding up? A teenager near the back of the shelter was listening, to a small radio, trying to find news from other parts of New Geneva. His face went pale as he heard the reports. "The university district is gone," he whispered. "The children's school complex, destroyed. The refugee processing center." His voice broke. "There's nothing left." Su-Jin closed her eyes and tried not to think about all the people she knew who worked in those places. Teachers, doctors, social workers who helped new arrivals adapt to life on New Geneva. Good people whose only crime was choosing to help others. The attack lasted for 6 hours. When the bombing finally stopped, the silence was almost worse than the noise had been. No one wanted to be the first to suggest going outside to see what remained of their world. Finally, emergency rescue teams from other systems arrived. Su-Jin helped carry the children up the stairs and out into what used to be their neighborhood. The medical center was still standing, but everything around it looked like a hellscape. Where the children's hospital had been, there was only a crater. The school where many of these refugee children had been learning to read human words was now a pile of broken concrete. Families wandered through the rubble, calling out names of people who would never answer. The final count would take weeks to complete, but the numbers were horrifying. Of 3 million people who had lived on New Geneva, less than 200,000 survived. Most of the dead were civilians, teachers, doctors, shop owners, children who had been playing in parks when the attack began. News of the massacre spread quickly through human space. The images were too terrible to ignore, children's toys scattered. Among burning wreckage, hospital beds thrown into the street, entire neighborhoods reduced to ash and memory. Something changed in the human psyche that day. Something that had been sleeping for centuries began to wake up, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Admiral Cho Hyun walked slowly to the speaking platform in the Great Hall on Earth. Behind him, giant screens showed pictures from New Geneva that made people cry. Burned hospitals, destroyed schools, and the bodies of children who would never grow up. Every human in the solar system was watching this moment. The hall was completely quiet. Even the alien ambassadors who usually whispered during human speeches sat perfectly still. Something in the air felt different, dangerous in a way that made everyone nervous. "My fellow humans," Cho began, his voice carrying to every corner of human space through the communication networks. "For 200 years, we have been the galaxy's peacekeepers. We have chosen to heal instead of hurt, to build instead of destroy." He paused and looked directly at the alien observers sitting in the special section. "Many of you have wondered why we are so good at making peace. You think we are weak because we choose not to fight. You believe we do not understand war because we try to prevent it." Cho pressed a button, and the screens behind him changed. Now they showed images from Earth's history that had been classified for centuries. Ancient battlefields covered with millions of dead soldiers. Cities turned to glass by nuclear fire. Oceans poisoned by chemical weapons. "This is why we chose peace," Cho said quietly. "Not because we are weak, but because we know what war really means. We turned our own world into hell for 10,000 years. We perfected killing in ways that would make your warriors sick with fear." The alien ambassadors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. These images were from a primitive world, but the destruction shown was beyond anything they had seen in modern galactic warfare. "We stopped fighting ourselves and went to the stars because we learned that peace was better than victory. We became helpers and healers because we remembered what it felt like to be the ones who needed help and healing." Cho's voice grew harder. "But some species have forgotten that our choice to be peaceful was exactly that, a choice. The Catherians believe that because we do not start wars, we cannot finish them. They have made a terrible mistake. In military bases across human space, soldiers who had spent years learning to be rescue workers and medical assistants began opening storage rooms that had been sealed for generations. Inside were weapons designed by the same minds that had created Earth's dark history. The Catherian Empire has declared war on humanity by murdering our children. They have chosen to remind us of skills we hoped never to use again. So be it." Cho looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting to every human world. As of this moment, Earth declares total war against the Catherian Empire. Not a police action, not a peacekeeping mission. War. The kind of war that decides whether civilizations survive or disappear forever. On factory worlds throughout human space, production lines that had been making medical equipment for decades suddenly stopped. Workers who had built hospital beds and food processors began building something very different. The blueprints they followed came from files so old that most humans had forgotten they existed. The first new warship rolled out of the orbital shipyards above Earth just 3 weeks later. It looked nothing like the peaceful exploration ships that humans usually built. This vessel was designed for one purpose only: to make sure that enemies of humanity would regret their choice to become enemies. Captain Yu Jin-woo, who had spent 15 years commanding a research ship, found himself studying battle tactics that his grandfather's grandfather might have used. The knowledge was still there, buried in human military archives, waiting for the day when peace was no longer an option. "Sir, the new plasma cannons are ready for testing," reported his weapons officer, Lieutenant Han So-ra. She had been a navigation specialist until 3 weeks ago. Now she was learning to target enemy ships with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. "How many ships will be ready for the first strike?" Jin-woo asked. 12 battle groups, sir. Each group has enough firepower to level a planet." Jin-woo nodded. It was not enough to simply defeat the Catherians. They had to be taught a lesson that would prevent any other species from making the same mistake. The message had to be clear. Attacking human civilians was not just wrong, it was suicide. Across the galaxy, other species watched with growing alarm as humanity's true nature began to show itself. Ships that had carried medical supplies suddenly appeared armed with weapons that military analysts could not identify. Humans, who had been gentle diplomats, began speaking in terms that made professional soldiers nervous. The Zentorian ambassador, who had once joked about humans being like helpful pets, sent an urgent message to his homeworld. "Cancel all military exercises near human space. I repeat, cancel all exercises. We may have seriously misjudged this species." Even humanity's closest allies began to worry. The Altarians, who had worked with humans for over a century, watched in shock as their peaceful partners transformed into something they did not recognize. But it was too late for second thoughts. The machinery of human war, sleeping for 2 centuries, had awakened hungry and angry. Every factory, every shipyard, every human mind was now focused on a single goal: making sure that the species who had murdered children on New Geneva would never be able to hurt anyone ever again. The Catherians, celebrating their easy victory over a defenseless colony world, had no idea what was coming for them. They would learn, but the lesson would be their last. Captain Yu Jin-woo stood on the bridge of his warship, looking at the Catherian homeworld through the front window. 6 months ago, he had been studying ocean plants on distant worlds. Now he commanded the UES Retribution, leading 12 groups of human battleships toward the heart of the empire that had killed children on New Geneva. "All ships ready, Captain," reported Commander Han So-ra from her weapons station. Her fingers moved over controls that had not existed a year ago. "Their space defenses are trying to lock onto us, but our new shields are holding easily." Jin-woo watched the enemy planet grow larger on his screen. Around it, hundreds of Catherian defense stations floated in space like metal moons. Each station had enough weapons to destroy a normal fleet. But human ships were no longer normal. "Begin the attack," Jin-woo ordered quietly. What happened next was not really a battle. It was more like a demonstration of what humans could do when they stopped being nice. The human ships moved together like parts of a machine, each one knowing exactly where to go and what to shoot. The first wave of human plasma cannons fired together. 30 Catherian defense stations simply disappeared, turned into glowing gas in seconds. The aliens had never seen weapons that powerful before. On the planet below, General Vextar watched his orbital defenses die one by one. He had expected the humans to send diplomats asking for peace talks. Instead, he was watching his most powerful weapons become space dust. "Sir, they're not even trying to communicate," reported his aide, fear clear in his voice. "They're just destroying everything. "Return fire with everything we have," Vextar ordered. But even as he said it, he knew it would not matter. The human ships moved too fast and their weapons were too strong. The second wave of human attacks targeted the Catherian fleet itself. Warships that had terrorized other species for decades found themselves helpless against enemies who fought with cold, perfect anger. Human battle tactics were not just about winning. They were about making sure the enemy could never fight again. Commander Park Jae-sung, leading the third battle group, watched his targeting computer identify a Catherian command ship. That vessel was at New Geneva, he told his crew. Make sure it burns slowly. The Catherian ship tried to run, but human vessels were faster. When the enemy ship finally exploded, Park felt no satisfaction. Nothing could bring back the children who had died on New Geneva, but at least these killers would never hurt anyone else. In space battles throughout the Catherian Empire, the same scene played out again and again. Human fleets appeared without warning, destroyed everything military in the system, and moved on to the next target. They did not stop to accept surrenders or negotiate terms. They had work to finish. The speed of the human advance shocked everyone, including humanity's allies. Within 3 months, the Catherian Empire's entire military had been cut to pieces. Planets that had been centers of alien military power were now defended by nothing but empty space. "How are they moving so fast?" asked the Altarian military commander, studying reports from the war zone. "It takes our fleets weeks to plan a single attack. The humans are hitting 5 systems at once." What the aliens did not understand was that humans had been practicing war for thousands of years before they ever left Earth. Every human commander had studied battles from their planet's bloody history. They knew how to coordinate attacks across vast distances because their ancestors had done it with much simpler tools. Lieutenant Kim Min-ho, serving on a human destroyer, explained it to a rescued prisoner. "My great-great-grandfather fought in wars on Earth where millions of soldiers moved together like one giant army. We're using the same ideas, just with spaceships instead of tanks." The psychological effect was just as important as the military destruction. Other species watched human forces work with machine-like efficiency, showing no mercy to enemies but perfect discipline in their attacks. It was terrifying in a way that pure violence could never be. On the Catherian homeworld, civilian leaders begged their military to surrender before the humans arrived. They had seen what happened to other Catherian worlds. Every military base destroyed, every warship turned to scrap, every weapon factory reduced to melted metal. "The humans are not like us," pleaded Minister Kexnari to the War Council. "They do not fight for glory or territory. They fight like they are removing a disease. They will not stop until we are completely helpless." But General Vextar refused to give up. He gathered the last of his forces around the homeworld, promising a final battle that would show the humans that Catherians were not afraid to die. When Jinwoo's fleet finally reached the Catherian homeworld, they found a desperate defense waiting for them. Thousands of fighters and hundreds of warships surrounded the planet like an angry cloud. "Sir, they're requesting communication," reported the communications officer. Jinwoo looked at the planet where the orders to murder human children had been given. "Tell them we'll talk after every Catherian military unit in the system has been destroyed, not before." The final battle lasted only 4 hours. When it was over, the most feared military empire in the galaxy existed only in history books. The humans had not just won, they had made sure that the Catherian Empire could never threaten anyone ever again. Dr. Lee Soo-jin watched children playing in the courtyard of the rebuilt medical center on New Geneva. 2 years had passed since the terrible day when Catherian ships had turned their peaceful world into a burning wasteland. Now, human and alien children ran together under the same sun, laughing and chasing each other without fear. The new buildings looked different from the old ones. They were stronger, built to last through anything that might come. But more importantly, they were protected by something the old colony had never needed: the knowledge that humanity would never again allow such destruction to happen to innocent people. "Dr. Lee?" A young voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Park Ji-ho, one of her medical students, holding a data tablet. The alien delegates are here for the memorial ceremony. Sujin nodded and walked toward the main plaza. Every year on this day, representatives from dozens of species came to New Geneva to remember the 3 million people who had died here. But their behavior around humans had changed completely since the war ended, where once alien diplomats had treated human officials like useful but weak partners. Now they spoke carefully and watched their words. The casual dismissal was gone, replaced by something between deep respect and nervous fear. Ambassador Nam Tae-hyung stood at the memorial podium, speaking to the gathered crowd. He talked about peace, about the value of every life, about humanity's commitment to protecting those who could not protect themselves. The same gentle words that human speakers had used for generations. But now everyone listening understood what happened when those gentle words were ignored. "We gather here not in anger but in remembrance," Nam said, his voice carrying across the plaza filled with beings from across the galaxy. "The children who died here will never be forgotten. Their deaths taught the universe a lesson that we pray will never need to be taught again." In the crowd, Sujin noticed how the alien representatives shifted uncomfortably when Nam spoke about lessons being taught. They remembered the news reports from the Catherian War. Entire fleets disappearing in hours, military planets reduced to empty space, an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries erased from existence in less than 8 months. After the ceremony, the Altarian ambassador approached Nam privately. Sujin was close enough to hear their conversation. "Ambassador, Nam," the blue-skinned alien said nervously, "when will humanity return to its old peaceful ways? Many of my people are worried about the changes we have seen in your species." Nam smiled. It was the same diplomatic smile he had always worn, polite and reassuring. But something in his eyes made the alien take a step backward. "We never stopped being peaceful," Nam replied softly. "We simply reminded the galaxy why our peace should never be taken for granted." The Altarian ambassador nodded quickly and hurried away to rejoin his delegation. Sujin noticed that several other alien officials had been listening from a distance, and they too seemed eager to leave after hearing Nam's response. Later that evening, Sujin sat in her office reading reports from across human space. The war had ended 2 years ago, but its effects continued to shape galactic politics in ways that amazed her. Trade disputes that had dragged on for decades were suddenly resolved when one side suggested asking humans to mediate. Territorial conflicts that had seemed impossible to solve were quickly settled after human diplomats offered to help with negotiations. Even minor disagreements between species were handled more carefully, with everyone eager to avoid any situation that might anger Earth. Captain Kim Dae, now commanding a much larger medical ship, had told her about his recent missions. "It's strange," he had said during his last visit to New Geneva. "We still do the same work, delivering supplies, helping refugees, treating the sick. But now, when we arrive at a system, military commanders from both sides of any conflict immediately want to talk peace." The galaxy had become more peaceful than it had been in centuries, not because conflicts had stopped arising, but because no species wanted to risk becoming the next example of what happened when humanity's patience finally ran out. Sujin thought about the weapons that human factories had produced during the war. Most of them had been quietly stored away after the Catherian surrender, but everyone knew they still existed. Somewhere in human space, those terrible instruments of war waited in case they were ever needed again. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. One of the refugee children, a small girl with purple skin, peeked into the office. "Dr. Lee, are the bad ships ever coming back?" the child asked. Sujin knelt down to the girl's level and spoke gently. "No, sweetheart, the bad ships are never coming back. And if any other bad ships ever try to hurt people like you, there are good people who will stop them." The child smiled and ran back to her friends. Sujin watched her go, thinking about how simple the truth really was. Humanity had not become more violent or aggressive. They had simply made it clear that their choice to be peaceful was exactly that, a choice. The galaxy now understood that behind every human doctor treating alien patients, every human engineer fixing broken stations, every human diplomat working to prevent wars, stood the same species that had turned the powerful Cytherian Empire into a cautionary tale. Peace was not weakness. Sometimes, it was the most terrifying strength of all.